This is the Messiah Hour with Ari Lewis.
Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. Thank you for joining us. At any time, you can send an email to messiahhour@gmail.com, or you can send a donation via PayPal to israelsportsradio@yahoo.com. Again, that's israelsportsradio@yahoo.com. The Iran deal makes a lot of people very, very nervous, but is it a sign of the Messianic era will perhaps come in a very short amount of time? Here to discuss this, the co-author of The World of Ger, our favorite rabbi from Tzfat, Rabbi David Katz. Rabbi, how you doing out there?
Hi, Artie. Thanks for having me back, as always.
Yes, indeed. So this deal, there was talk a few months ago about President Obama saying that it would be a good deal for everyone, and now recently the sanctions have been lifted, apparently, and Iran will most likely make a nuclear bomb. Tell us, are there any signs in the Talmud, or Gemara, anything that indicate that we will get to this point at this time?
In all the literature about the end of days and Gog and Magog, there's a lot of party line material that has been floating around for maybe the last 15 years, or even going back to about 1990. 1990 is when it really got hot. But then it cooled off for a while, and then in the 2000s, it really picked up a lot of steam. A lot of these things are midrashim, Talmudic passages, and wherever we're at in time, we always want to see if the characters fit. When Russia starts, we bring back the whole I think it's when the Crimea has been taken by Russia. Look for Mashiach. When there's dead fish in the water, Messiah, son of David, comes in a time where the fish are not found in the waters. So there's a lot of diversity in the literature, and whenever the news seems to fit one of these passages, people that are kind of Gula watchers are looking for the dots to connect. One thing that stuck out in my mind over the years is that in 2006, I was in Tzfat, where I'm at now, and we had the war, and I fled to Jerusalem, like most of Tzfat, and was checking the news every day. And I think it was just before the war started, or I forget which part. There was a rabbi in Tzfat who's passed away since then, but we said, is this it? Is this the end? Because there's a famous Zohar that Mashiach can start to become revealed in a year that ends in 66. And back then it was 57-66 with the Hezbollah war. We said, is this it? And this is like a really straight Litvak. I mean, no Kabbalah, no weird Tzfat mysticism. And he said like this. He said, every other war and year, it's always really contrived to find the characters. It's like, let's say when Reagan fought against like the Latin America rulers, you say, well, maybe he's an aspect of Gog, and there's a couple of Jews in Honduras, whatever it is, just kind of ridiculous. But he said this war was different. The Talmud predicts in all of its end game scenarios, Yaakov, Ishmael, and Esav. And all the players back then we were getting interested in Iran, which is Pras, which is Persia. He said, for the first time maybe in history, we don't have to twist our arms behind our back to find our characters in this story. Very literally, you have Ishmael, Yaakov, and Esav. That was true then, and it's only getting more and more true now. And I'll give the same answers consistently matching what he said. We are at the end based on the characters. If we're not at the end, then the characters will only grow with more clarity. We're not going to go back. Right? So if Obama's not Gog, I'm not saying he is. Let's just throw it out there. If he's Gog, if Putin's Gog, if Iran is Ishmael, as the Maharal of Prague says, that Iran is the essence of the kingdom of Ishmael. That was said in the year 1500-ish. Let's say not now, not this situation. Then you can expect in the near future things will only get more clear. Maybe Iran will have a new flag. We are the kingdom of Ishmael in 30 years from now. Who knows? But it's only going to get more clear. And one of the main passages that has been hashed over in this recent series of events over the last, 10, 15 years is the Talmudic tractate Yoma. On page 10, it identifies actually the Yavan states, which is one of the sons of Noah, Yavan, or Japheth, who became Greek, the Greek states. But Japheth, however you want to say it, Shem and Ham. Ham became African. Shem became, I think Iran is actually Semitic, and then eastward. Esav then took over in Europe, which became Japheth, and Greece proper, Yavin, which makes sense why Greece is in the news today. Anyways, it identifies all the players kind of in an updated model of 2,000 years ago from where it began in the times of Noah. And it talks about that one of the states is actually called Magog, which obviously Gog and Magog. So it's a lot of loose symbolism of the end of days, but one really sticks out is that it's prophesied there that in the end of days there will be a war between Pras and Edom. Esav, the west, and Pras, which is Ishmael or the Arabian belief states, because the Iranians are not Arabs, but just the whole Middle Eastern. Because that was pre-Muslim, so it was the Middle Eastern states, but now we can just call it Islam and Christianity, or the Middle East in the West. Or again, Pras and Edom is the real terminology, which is Persia, Iran, and Edom would be the European states, and we know that America is the leadership of those European states. It's said that they will go to war, and the Gemara, the Talmud, doesn't know who wins the war. One aspect thinks that it's Edom. Another way you can say Pras. Try to stay on top of those terminologies for this broadcast because they're the most apropos to the topic. Pras and Edom. Again, Persia, Iran, Edom, the West, America, and the European states. And it's a question who wins that war, what the nature of the war is. All we know is they're destined to go at it. We don't know who's going to win. And, as current events unfold, we can always look back in history and find out how history viewed these states. And what we can see on our political map is that whatever Persia is and was, it's been a universal antagonist pretty much in all of its existence. So the enemy state against Israel, Persia is not new as its enemy, and we see that with the Purim story. And therefore, those characters 2,000 years ago, they could foresee there's going to be a time that the Jews come back to their land. We know that. It's prophetic. We know where Persia is located. So there's going to be a war between the two, and we know that Edom has its fingers in the land of Israel. So there's going to be you can just tell the proxy relationship based on who Edom is and was and where he's located, and the same with Iran, Persia, and Yaakov, Israel. So you can paint an apocalyptic picture that if it comes down to this certain flavor of end of days, this is how it's going to be. Now, it could have gone other ways as well. It could have been from merit. I mean, it could have been Mashiach on a donkey. It could have been a thing with Egypt. But those players are still in our view today. It just looks like the Iranian saga is right now center stage, but that could change. If North Korea wants to throw a nuke on New York, that's going to change things. So where the weather map is right now, we're in the Iranian story where the Saudi Arabians then are going back and forth, says the Midrash, between Persia and the West, asking for help. So we see all the storylines. When Damascus is destroyed, you can know that Mashiach is close. Well, Damascus is very close to being destroyed. So they're all coming true. Now, will they become more true in the future? Will there be a nuke dropped on Damascus? Will it be Sodom and Gomorrah? Who knows? But right now, we can answer all of our scenarios, and the Iranian issue is more than center stage. I mean, this is all the world's talking about. So you have to say where we are. We must entertain these apocalyptic literature scenarios to see where we're at, where we were, where we're going to go, what the wisdom is, and see if the news really keeps in sync with where we're going in the Torah scheme of things.
This is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest is Rabbi David Katz, co-author of the book The World of the Ger. We're discussing the deal with Iran. You were talking about the war between Pras and Esav, and the war doesn't know who wins. Does that mean that the winner of the war is not destined? That it could be, it's not in Hashem's plan, if you will. It could be one of the two, and Hashem himself is not going to decide it and let the two countries figure it out, fight it out.
We don't know. That's the beauty of apocalyptic literature. Is it a cyber war? I mean, that's a possibility, isn't it? Is it a political war? Is it a nuclear war? Is it even a war? Is it this? No one knows. That's why you really have to view prophecy as it's unfolding in real time. Right now, we're watching the Ger movement happen prophetically, and you couldn't have predicted it until it happened. So there's a famous thing called the Gerim Grurim, these non-Jews that are coming back into Israel, demanding by doing mitzvahs. No one knew what they look like. Now we see what they look like. So it's not as scary as some would have thought, or as whatever. Opinions don't really come into it. It's just reality, and we're seeing the beginnings of the Iranian reality. Again, I mentioned that the Maharal of Prague mentions Iran, and Mashiach comes from the clouds of Ishmael. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it clouds of nuclear fallout? I mean, we just don't know. The real question I think you're asking, Ari, is it a Gula barachamim or a Geula from din? Is it going to be of judgment, or is it going to be with mercy? And we have to pray and believe it's going to be merciful. All of the Kabbalistic literature wants to say that it's going to be sweetened with mercy. The certain flavor of opinions want to say it's going to be, din and retribution, and 7 people will survive. All these, horrible doom and gloom weather forecasts. I personally think it's going to be merciful. Vilna Gaon brings in a mashal or an analogy. If a king gets upset at his son and threatens to kill him, and the king says, "I have to kill you now because I went and told everyone I'm going to kill you. I decided to kill you with a 1,000-ton rock. I'm going to throw in your head. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my guys pulverize the rock into dust, and I'm going to have the dust dropped on you, and it's the same thing as having endured that rock. That's called Sar Misa, the pain and burden of dying. When you die, it's not that you really died. It's that you had to experience the shock of death. Right? It's like, if your whole dream is to be a radio broadcaster, and whoever God put your fate in someone's hands, they said, "Ari, it's over. Go get a day job." It's like you have to swallow that and say, "Man, this is really horrible. I really wanted to do this." And we all have to swallow that pride at some point, and you realize, for me, I wasn't meant to be an Olympic wrestler. That dream was squashed in high school, but I had to swallow that. It was a type of death, and we all do. And where you live eternally is in the real you. So Ari Lewis will be an eternal radio broadcaster, God willing. Yes. But in parts of your life, you're going to have to admit that you died, and your ultimate death is when God says you did not remove evil and the snake from this world. And you're guilty. You didn't help build the temple, so you have to experience that failure, shortcoming that you had in your death. So it wasn't that you died; it was that you had to be shocked to death, so to speak. And that has to be accomplished in the end of days. And many people think it has to be like, I'm going to be choking on gas, and a miracle will allow me to keep breathing. Maybe, I doubt it. It's more like the world events are going to make everyone freaked out to the point where you're going to realize, man, we almost really died. And that'll be a proper vessel to bring repentance and accomplish the spiritual achievements that can allow us to perceive the true messianic end in the Messiah himself and ultimately the third temple.
Now, one of the things I want to bring up, whether someone's Democrat or Republican, I think they would have to agree that President Obama really came out of nowhere. He was basically a state senator and then a senator for a couple of years and then ran for president. So was this all set up? A lot of people think that Obama was set up to bring Michelle closer, etc., drive the Jews out, all these different types of theories. Well, perhaps he was there to allow this deal to occur with Iran. I just want to get your thoughts, a little bit of a political flavor, but tell us your thoughts about why you think Obama was inserted to set this whole thing up.
Wasn't he a community organizer?
Yeah, he was before that.
That's the point. It's like the guy's. It's kind of insulting to watch him. I mean, politicians are kind of nasty these days, but Bush, when they say he was just elected as the worst president that they ever had. But I kind of like Bush. I mean, he was horrible, but you felt like you had a leader. You know, when you saw Bush and his shortcomings, you knew you were, even if it was NWO, okay, he was a leader. And his dad was a leader. Clinton was a leader. I mean, even Hillary would be more of a leader than Obama. Obama's not a leader. You know, and people say he's a devout Christian. Leave him alone. He's not a devout Christian. Okay, let's make that clear. And I'm not saying he's a devout Muslim either. What I'm saying is the guy is devoid of any truth whatsoever. Like, Christianity might not be truth, but those people believe it is. And the reason why I'm saying it is, as a rabbi, you can pick up people's verbiage. Ari, if I was a radio guy, would you know it by the way I talk?
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah, and if I'm like, no, I'm not a radio guy, you'd still know.
Right.
Yeah. So, for example, I like to bring this up. If Moshe Kleineman was president of the United States, okay, and he says like this, "Hello, my fellow Americans. I'd like to introduce you to my good colleague, Benjamin Netanyahu, who he learns the Torah, he learns Torah. But by the way, it's like, where does that come from? Torah, right? Because when you hear Obama speak, I think from the first talks he did in Cairo, he has his political thing, which by the way is contrived. He gives a false JFK thing. Because if you hear him talking with his friends, he's educated. He went to Harvard. And when he talks to America, it's folks. He lowers it dafka, which in Hebrew means like in your face. Folks, we can't be doing this. I mean, it's totally contrived. He does NLP, and then he says like this, and you can look it up on YouTube. He says the Holy Quran. You don't do that. I know how to say the word Quran too, like Quran. But when I teach, I don't say, when the Muslims in their Quran. No, I'm calling it the Quran dafka. I'm not going to sit and say it. I'm just not. And so I'm not going to give credence to a book that is just false and say, Ari, the Torah contrasts with the Quran. No way. It's the Quran. It's Afghanistan, not Afghanistan. I'm just not going there. For him to say Quran, it just shows you where what he holds is important. And he called it the Holy Quran. Now, no one would do that. For example, I'll give you another example before I answer the question. I used to teach English in a Muslim village in the north of Israel. And it was the Yud Zayin Tammuz fast where I was in the village. And the imam that I was working with who ran the school, this was in my transition from Kollel to what I'm doing now. And he said, David, today we are fasting. I'm like, wow, man, interesting, me too. I said, why are you fasting? He said, it's our holiday. I said, what's the holiday? He says, today Moses brought out the Israelites and they fasted. I said, how do you know that? He says, the Prophet Muhammad, he saw, he knew. And I said, he knew that Moshe Rabbeinu fasted? And he says, yes, Moshe Rabbeinu fasted. I'm like, wow, you just said Moshe Rabbeinu. I got the imam to say Moshe Rabbeinu. I said, back then I was telling my friends, that's like me going to my Rosh Hashiva and saying, your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. It's that, you can't say Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm not saying the guy was a heretic, but the point is, your loyalties have to lie within your faith. And he does not show from my Christian interactions with Christians. I mean, in my Ger work, I deal with former Christians, right? And so you see how Christians talk. A lot of people checking out Ger Noahide come from just out of the church. They don't know Torah, and they don't sound like Jews, right? So you hear how the church lingo is, and I'm telling you straight up, that guy has nothing to do with Christianity, because none of the words that I'm familiar with from my interactions with non-Jews, he doesn't use those words, not at all. Bush, he was talking about, his God and things like that. Obama has never, ever made a Yashka reference. That to me is a red flag. He should be making those references. Like, why isn't he? If you're a Christian and you go to your church and you're all excited, you got your reverend who's a conspiracy theorist, all these things, whatever they do, why is he not, more even appeasing the Christians in America? Right? He should be saying, "Hey, I'm with Jay just like you," but he's not, and that's a huge red flag. And again, he's very Hamish with the Muslims in what he calls the Holy Quran. Big problem. And we already know he lies openly on every issue. There's just no emes there. Bush is lying to your face. He's an NWO guy, but he at least said I'm gonna go attack Afghanistan, and he did. The next day. So he was a man of his word on a certain level to people. This guy, I wouldn't, if you had a nickel in your apartment, he'd steal it from you. So the point is, who put him there? I don't know. Was he put there? I think so. What's the plot? I think the only way to answer that question is you gotta blow it up to a bigger issue, and you don't know what's going on. There's so much depth to these politics. World Wars I and II, no one knows how they started and how they ended. The real scholars don't really know what did it because they were so deep in the politics and industrial regime. And, did Hitler actually die? Did he go to South America? Who was backing the Nazis? Were Jews involved? Were Arab Rav involved? It's so twisted and deep. Then you bring in the British, United Kingdom. That's already shady. So now this is that like exponentially times 100. You have no idea who's behind who and what is what. And that's what pushed the first two world wars. That's ultimately what's going to push this war. It is impossible to know the truth about Obama or Putin, even Netanyahu, Pollard. All we know is it's shady. Again, are there powers of good that is driving a messianic revelation, or is it strictly a Moloch? We don't know.
Talk a little bit. You were talking about George W. Bush being part of the New World Order. I find that pretty interesting. Can you elaborate a little more? You think that's why he attacked Afghanistan?
I mean, his father. There's a famous clip on YouTube. He says, you can find the link. It says, I forget the exact language, but we are going to make a new world order. I mean, no paraphrasing. He says those words. I mean, in terms of using the words "new world order." And he's in with the CIA, obviously, so we know the father's mad shady. Just a bit of background information where the Bush family comes from, and I particularly stay away from conspiracy theories and Alex Jones type stuff, but you can look this up. George Bush's relative, 1844, the original. I don't know if he's the original George Bush, but he's an original George Bush. Wrote a commentary to the Book of Ezekiel. And it outlined the pre-Zionist plan of putting the Jews in the land of Israel to help facilitate the coming of Yeshu. And by the time of Herzl in the late 1800s, the West was already on board with Zionism. Zionism began with the Vilna Gaon, obviously devoid of these things. It became corrupt and taken over for monetary gains and political gains because it was a great idea. The time was right to put the Jews back in the land and do all your, that whatever conspiracy theories are just global secret societal things. And they predicted the Jews would be on their land 100 years before it happened. Obviously, then that became the Bush family whatever. It became embedded in American doctrine. This is why America is a self-proclaimed best friend of Israel. Also why Canada is a great friend of Israel. Because Zionism really, in the Western version, Christian Zionist radical, was born out of those men in those ages. So the Bush family is just born into that. That's their royalty. That's what their thing is. They created the concept of a Jew literally on the land of Israel to fulfill the prophecy of Ezekiel. And you can read it. It's online. This is a book online. It spells it very clearly what their agenda was, and people just don't think back that far. They think Zionism began with Herzl. It really didn't. I mean, it's like thinking that Bill Gates invented Windows. He really didn't. That was Apple and Steve Jobs, icons. So people have a short memory when it comes to history, and the Bush family is rooted in this corrupt version of Zionism. And New World Order, I don't think it's the conspiracy thing people think it is. It's what it really is, we don't know. That's why conspiracy theories know there's something, and they automatically take it to the devil, 666, the beast, Babylonian stuff, Jews, Lubavitchers, the Rebbe. I mean, it's ridiculous. But what they sniff out is that there is a world agenda, and that shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, the Scantron test we took in high school was an agenda. Just because we didn't know what the truth was. And everything's an agenda. Me telling my son that there's no more cookies when actually there are, all right, because it's an agenda too. So on every level, there's an agenda. Do we know the agenda? No. Can we know it? We can, but only in the present moment. We can only know what we know and what's available in retrospect as a fact. Going forward, we can't really follow the future. And I think this is where your previous question was. The future's not written. That's what you're saying about the outcome of the war. The future is not written. And as things go, then you can keep current in real time and like keep your tic-tac-toe or bingo board ready to proclaim bingo. But until there really is a bingo, there's just no bingo.
This is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest is Rabbi David Katz. Of course, if you want to send a donation via PayPal, you can do so at IsraelSportsRadio.yahoo.com. Again, IsraelSportsRadio.yahoo.com. Rabbi, you brought up Zionism, of how Zionism really began. I'm curious, how would you really define Zionism or Zion, or what does the Kabbalah say about Zion?
The Vilna Gaon, I'm going to just paint a really big picture here. There's a Zohar prophecy. You'll say, wait a minute, Rabbi Katz, the Zohar is not prophetic. Okay, we know that. Hold your questions and comments, please. Wherever the Zohar got wind of this prophecy, let's just say the Zohar documented it, right? I know people like to freak out over Zohar stuff. That's the devil incarnate. But no, it's not. The Zohar brings a prophecy saying that in the year 5500 in the Jewish calendar, there's going to be the wellsprings of heaven and earth are going to explode and open up, and it's going to be unprecedented for 100 years. We know for a fact, even Art Scroll acknowledges this fact. That's how accepted it is. That in Gashmias, physicality, the Industrial Revolution began in the 1700s. Right? We're looking at and the 5500 to 5600 was around 1740 to 1840. I think Rockefeller was born right around 1840. So it's and the Rothschild banking took place, like what's his name, Anschel, whatever, the father that started it. Yeah, that was around the same time. The world, Napoleon and his revolution, it all happened then. And so the physical world that we live in today was born then. So the wellsprings of heaven opened up. And Judaism today is a carbon copy of the four men that lived at that time. Sephardim followed the Rashash, which culminated with the Ben Ish Chai, and that means Sephardi Judaism 101. Litvish Judaism, just even the Reform Jews really came from Litvox. My mother just made Aliyah and brought me books from a cousin of mine named Harry Joshua Stern, who was a Reform interfaith rabbi in Montreal. And what's interesting is because today Reform, you saw the ministers of Israel said they're not even Jewish. But, this guy was born in Lithuania, and he's calling his contemporaries Litvox. I mean, how's that for Reform? You know what I mean? These guys were as Jewish as they come. They just believed in Reform. So they had your Litvish, Litvak Judaism, and the Baal Shem Tov, and had your Hasidic. So even if you're not religious today, your families are going back to either Lithuanian or Hasidish, or if you're Sephardi, like the Zohar kind of Kabbalah Sephardi tradition, or if you're more of into just kind of thinking and Dati Lumi, then the Ramchal was the father of your tree. And those four rivers came out of the Lurianic Kabbalah, which gave rise to the inspiration of those four men. And Judaism today is a product of the wellsprings that opened up in spirituality. Zionism then was the work of the Vilna Gaon called Zionit Gra'it, Zionism of the Gra. In his work, his dual work, the Kol HaTor, Voice of the Turtle Dove, and Midrash Shlomo, which is essentially the keys to understanding the traditions of Vilna Gaon Zionism. He didn't have permission to come to the Holy Land, just couldn't make it. And his students were sent to Sfat in Jerusalem, which is also documented in a 3 series of works. Chazan Sion, Soda, Musadi Yasod, and another one. Chazan, I forget what it was called. And they teamed up with the Lubavitchers and the students of the Baal Shem Tov. So all you people out there to think that the Vilna Gaon couldn't exist with the Baal Tanya, that is not correct either. They actually got along very well. Their students over here worked together and founded the very two cities this broadcast right now is being brought out of, Jerusalem and Sfat. Thanks to Rabbi Katz and Ari Lewis. We're keeping the tradition alive, Ari.
Yes, we are. Yes, indeed.
So they invented Zionism and founded it and laid the platform for the Yishuv. Then, obviously, they needed money. They got real broke real quick. Earthquakes came, famine came. The Ottoman Empire was not friendly. A lot of the students left to get money. The numbers became very small. There was always a little a dwelling inside the old city of Jerusalem and Sfat. But they wanted to expand. The Yishuv actually means outside the walls of the old cities. And they went broke. And at that time, everyone needed money. So, as much as the Jews that were involved needed money, the people that saw that Zionism could make a lot of money then needed money to push Zionism. Because it was a big money maker in the eyes of people like Herzl and the Bush family. Putting the Jews on the land, that's a big thing. I have the diaries of Herzl, and he you would think the guy was a maniac, just nut. But the fact that his vision came true makes it real. You would not believe his diaries if there was not a state of Israel today. He's like, I gotta write to the Rothschilds and ask for $5 billion, not a problem. They'll give it. I'm like, what? Who thinks like that? Sure he'll give you $5 billion. But he wrote it, and he wrote the letters, and he really got the funding. And there's an Israel today, and they had the world's first Zionist Congress. And again, the people in the 1800s, Bush and the West got wind, and there's your right-wing radical Christian Zionist. So Zionism got hijacked underneath the Vilna Gaon model. By the 20th century, the Frum Jews were here pushing the Vilna Gaon model, and it got hijacked by secularism. Fast forward to Rav Kook. He held of the Vilna Gaon model, and the Judaism in this state is still Rav Kook Judaism. But the Charedim fought it very harsh. The Heter Mechira and the Shemitah year, very horrible attacks. They called Rav Kook basically an Am Haaretz, which is a total Chil Hashem. And only now the Charedim, the religious Jews, have accepted Zionism, except for a couple congregations, and everyone basically agrees that the state is here. And making a revival is the Vilna Gaon Zionism. And Vilna Gaon Zionism is totally divorced from secular Zionism, but what it proclaims is the return to Zionism, Zion. And Zion is the place that unites heaven and earth, which then very much goes to that prophecy of 5500. And just as the wellsprings of heaven and earth were open then, the end of days is the time that the Sheffa from Shemayim, the bounty from God himself, will intensify and basically restore the world to Gan Eden. And Hanukkah was the real beginning of that. But then it got sabotaged and went into Klippa, or evil, and our Kabbalistic doctrine, really explained by the Arizal, is returning that light and having it come down the right way. And the Kabbalah that we learn is that process. And again, it was a big boon in 1740. And it again got hijacked. And the final end is when there's no more hijacking of the bounty. We stop thinking in terms of a McDonald's wisdom and mentality for mankind, and rather a wisdom mentality. Teaching people how to cook and providing people how to cook and encouraging and making accessible real cooking, real food, instead of saying it's just better for all of us if you eat McDonald's and carry the name brand and motto for these really horrible organizations. Coca-Cola is not healthy. There's no reason why water shouldn't be healthy, and putting fluoride in it is not doing anybody any favors. So restoring the world to that type of real pure godliness is another way of calling it Sheffa, the real bounty from God. And that Sheffa is destined to hit the rock, the Evan Shtia, and it eventually is distributed all the way out to the most distant islands and nations, as spoken of in Psalm 72. So Zion is the target for God to give to the world, and ultimately there should be a temple built there to structure that Sheffa Kabbalistically, so that everybody gets the truest good that his soul deserves. And the temple, with Jews working the land, is the real Zionism that we strive for, that will perfect the world.
Again, this is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest is Rabbi David Katz, talking about the Iran nuclear deal and how that could bring Mashiach closer. We're talking about what the Kabbalah says about Zion. What does the Kabbalah say about the Beit HaMikdash?
So the Beis HaMikdash is then the capture of that Sheffa. Right now, the Sheffa is coming down in the Dome of the Rock. Very much so. But you see, we've entered the exile of Ishmael. So all that Sheffa was, you can say, that the reason why Edom collapsed and Ishmael was erected was because he succeeded in putting a mosque there, and they did not put the church. So all that Sheffa rounded through the Erev Rav, right? People, impure souls. It allowed for a transfer of domain from Esav Edom Western society to Ishmael, which, look on the news. We're living in Sharia law. ISIS now is part of the fabric. As kids, you and I, we never saw such things. In school, Islam was really called evil. I grew up in a secular, Christian America, Dayton, Ohio. And there were some Jews in my town, but Christianity was the norm for those people, and they accepted me as a Jew. But Islam was, it was really frowned upon. Today, if you don't worship Islam, you're a racist. And you can see how the Sheffa coming down is turning the world into an Arab village. And it's starting to look like that and feel like it. A McDonald's society is synonymous with an Arab village. They're run down. They're poverty-stricken. They like the world like that. It's just, that's their, it's almost like, the Haredi belief that if you don't work, that's really good. You shouldn't have any responsibilities in working. That's not true. Right? Torah comes with work and elevating the world. Ishmael, he wants the world to look horrible, because then, the Mahdi will come, or Allah likes it like that. Whatever they believe, it's corruption. It's like a woman that has no self-esteem. She wants to look cheap instead of with dignity. That's not healthy. You're supposed to have dignity. So the world is losing its dignity because of the transfer of Sheffa to Ishmael, whose beliefs are really bringing the world into a real life Gehenna. And the temple is the opposite of that. It is the bringing up the world to dignity, to a place where we can stand with God in this world and serve God through the temple and experience the Sheffa that God brings us really personally through his messengers, and all the heavenly worlds unite for the sake of giving man the goodness that he deserves.
All right, so we talked about what the Kabbalah says about Zion and the Beit HaMikdash. What about Sheffa?
The Sheffa is just that real, raw good. Not a loaf of bread. A loaf of bread is exploitation, like we said a couple weeks ago. Right? You need to learn how to make the bread. You need to get the wisdom of how to make bread. And I will give you the wisdom of how to make parnasa, that you will always have enough money to go buy flour and spices and salt and yeast, all the things you need to make bread. I will give you those, says God. Right? I will make sure you have that wisdom that you are not lacking. But if you want bread, that's not good, because then you're depending on somebody else. So the manna of the desert was introducing the concept of heavenly food. And once they went into Israel, now you, with your wisdom, manna was essentially real edible wisdom. In the land of Israel, you have to make your own heavenly food. Sheffa is the wisdom and inspiration that will bring you your soul's delight. And thus, McDonald's by definition is the antithesis to such energy that we should crave and desire.
And so what about the Erev Rav? How does that play into all this, and what does the Kabbalah say about them?
So the state of Israel, as we said, got hijacked from Vilna Gaon Zionism to a secular monetized Zionism. And that's the power of the Erev Rav. Any kind of holiness seized not in a truthful way. Well, taking the land of Israel is the essence of that, right? Taking the Holy Land and making it not holy, and proclaiming, Bibi saying, this is a Jewish land. Well, not according to what you say. Your view is not holy. It's only half the story, and that's what gives Ishmael a way to wedge himself in. If we would keep the Torah and really be a holy society, Ishmael would disappear. So the Erev Rav is the entity that captures that Sheffa and internalizes it for its own gain first, and then gives it out to the nations, and then kosher Jews get theirs at the end. My friend tells me a joke. Why do the products of Sfat, why are they so horrible? The answer is the world gives its worst stuff to Israel, and then Israel sends its worst products to Sfat. So that's why we have horrible stuff here. And that's how Sheffa works with the Erev Rav. I get mine, then we send it out, and then the guy at the end, he gets what's left, a couple crumbs. And so the Erev Rav are holding back that Sheffa, and it's actually aiding the exile of Ishmael, kind of like completing a full circle of tumah, of impurity, and that's really what a major problem is. The Sheffa is not coming down the right way, but we say it is coming down regardless. So the Erev Rav, to make the circuit complete, all which began in 1740 and is intensified in the end of days. This is what I want you to focus on, Ari. If we are in the end of days, then all the messianic Sheffa, Melech Mashiach literally means the king of Sheffa, because oil is basically another sign of Sheffa. All that messianic Sheffa is being dumped into the hands of the Erev Rav. The big question is, what are they doing with that Sheffa? It's not an NWO conspiracy. The Jews run the world. It's not that. It's that the Sheffa is dumped on Israel's head. And it doesn't come in the guise of loaves of bread. It comes with the inspiration and wisdom. What is Israel doing with that wisdom? Now, we know there's a tech market that is unmatched. But you have to imagine, if it's the level of the Messiah himself, and that's what Armilus is, the Jewish Antichrist, so to speak. It's the level of wisdom and inspiration of Mashiach basically given into the wrong hands. You saw the movie Big with Tom Hanks back in the 80s or 90s, right?
Yeah.
And he was making tons of money as an executive. And he saw, what did he buy? An indoor basketball hoop. I mean, that's what the mashal is for these guys. What are they doing with that inspiration? So that's really the big thing with the Erev Rav.
All right, last question I have for you. You were saying we don't know how World War I and World War II got started or it ended, and then you said the same with this war. So you're saying a war is certain.
Yeah. There's going to be some kind of war. Netanyahu is determined to take out Iran. He cannot go back on it. It's pretty much impossible unless God totally just alters the world in such a way that we get it completely with mercy, God willing. But I want to paint a couple scenarios. If the Erev Rav are truly inspired, and this has been going on for a long time, what they have set up can be mind-blowing. One belief is that the state of Israel is Mashiach in terms of the beginning of its revelation. That what we do to defend ourselves could really blow the minds of everybody. Here's one thing my friend told me, just as a throw out there possibility. Israel did work in Iran in the 70s, right? They built buildings. They were friends back then. There's a Jewish star on one of the buildings there. It's not inconceivable that in 1975 or whatever it was, knowing that in the future Iran will turn against Israel, how do you know someone didn't plant a nuclear switch in a suitcase and just put it away, like the DeLorean time machine in Back to the Future, so that if it ever gets out of hand, one click, there they go. How do you know, as Stuxnet entered Iran, how do you know there's not 20 suitcases in each reactor place? The godless. The godless means the absolute highest level of wisdom and inspiration. that Israel is receiving for simply serving the land that Bush created by putting us here to get that Sheffa, the length that Israel has gone to receive that Sheffa and cultivate it, call it the startup market, our military stuff, desalinization of water. But in terms of defending Israel, the constitution of Zionism is securing a Jewish state. That is like the protocol. Nothing exists outside of that. And if they really have known their sources, which Zionism is based on Torah, and they know that Iran's the problem, when they could probably politically help guide that problem to maintain that problem, then they have the solution. Is Pollard a part of that? Is that why he's jailed? Because he knows the answer of the outcome. I think, yeah. I think they're so prepared, and for so long, the world will see the power of Mashiach simply by definition of the story that we've all bought into, yet it's still a surprise even at the end. Even the Israelis that, let's say were planning their survival since the creation from coming out of the Holocaust, and the nations know this, it'll still be a surprise and a shock. And when the light is revealed, it should, in theory, kill the evil and pave the way for the real crowning of the true Mashiach, the end of the Erev Rav, and the beginning of the building of the Beis Hamikdash, which would happen if when the Dome of the Rock is removed in a peaceful way, and that this light in Revelation would make a groundwork for removing the mosque. Once that's gone, in whatever way it takes form, I don't know, negotiations, whatever, when Islam is defeated and the exile of Ishmael is ended, let's say the kosher Jews, have been in position since the 67 war, people like the Temple Institute, and I think now we're ready to build the temple if we can get around the Ishmael exile, which apparently is in the hands of the Erev Rav, and that's their job, is to remove that, and then Kedusha can step in and we can get on with returning the land to its holy state.
Amen to that. Again, this is another episode of Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. The email is messiahhour@gmail.com. If you're listening to this program on the website, israelsportsandnewsradio.com, take a look at our donate tab. Click on that if you want to support this show financially. My guest has been Rabbi David Katz, co-author of the book, The World of the Ger. The rabbi's website, somazal.com, can teach you things about your name. And also, if you want to pick up the book, you can go to gergear.com. Rabbi, thank you for being on the program today. Great job as always.
Thanks for having me back, Ari.
Yes, indeed. And thank you, everyone, for listening. This is the Messiah Hour on IsraelSportsAndNewsRadio.com.